Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time it is a review of the 1987 coming-of-age film, White Water Summer. I call it a coming-of-age movie because I don't really consider it to be a thriller. There really isn't that many thrilling moments. There's bits and pieces. I mean, there's a nice little river canoeing sequence through the rapids near the end of the film, and there's a few other tense scenes, but it's more of a coming of age movie than it is a straight up thriller. Now, Kevin Bacon is front and center on this, and he's not really the star. He is in it, and he has a sizable role, but he's not the lead. The lead of this film is Sean Astin. Now, this is a movie that I like. I would say it's an above average film for what it is, for an 80s coming of age movie that has a good chunk of it that's pretty much just music videos. You saw that a lot in the 80s, where you had a lot of scenes that were just montages or just scenes that just existed to have something to watch while a 80s song was playing in the background. But you know what? I actually like a lot of the songs in this, so it works out just fine. It's directed by Jeff Bleckner, and Jeff Bleckner is known for his television work. He's not really a guy who's known for doing that many films, and it kind of shows. Like, he's done episodes of Hill Street Blues, he's done episodes of Remington Steele, he's done plenty of episodes of plenty of TV shows and done TV movies, but Whitewater Summer is, I think it's his only film that he directed theatrically, or that was intended for a theatrical release, but the film never actually got a wide release. It was only released in a few theaters in the Pacific Northwest. The studio, which I believe was Columbia at the time, they apparently didn't have any faith in the film and didn't give it a wide release, which seems to be a mistake considering this film has a decent sized cult following, apparently. There's a lot of 80s kids who grew up watching this movie on VHS. And, you know, I can see why kids would enjoy this. It's got kids in it. It's got Sean Astin, who's fresh off the success of The Goonies. It's got a good message to it overall, and the characters are likable for the most part, except for some of them are kind of dicks, but ultimately the film does a good job showing you that they're more than just one-note asshole characters. Now, the movie, it was originally slated for a release in 1985. It was actually finished under the title Rites of Summer, which fits the film a little bit more because Whitewater Summer, that's a nice title, but this is not Hold On for the Wildest Ride of Your Life type movie. This is not The River Wild before The River Wild. That's not what Whitewater Summer is. That's misleading advertising. This film is more, like I said, is more of a coming of age film akin to something like Stand By Me. It's not a breakneck thriller. That's not what it is. And the poster, the theatrical poster, it knows that. You know, the tagline is adventure with an attitude. But the home video release is trying to hype it up as some kind of movie that it isn't, which is a problem. Now, that being said, I don't know why it didn't just come out in 85, because this was Sean Astin fresh off of the enormous success of The Goonies. So I don't know why Columbia Pictures didn't just jump on that. I don't know what the holdup was. My guess is the holdup was this. I guess some people who were producers at the time, they did not like the movie. They didn't like it for some reason, or it had some bad screenings. So they shelved it. And then 2 years later, they got Sean Astin back and had him shoot these really cringy narration scenes where he's trying to be cool but falling flat on his ass. This is just one of the things about the film that I don't like. I do not like these inserts. They are clearly shot 2 years later. They don't match the film. They're random. They seem like padding, and I'm wondering what else was cut out of the movie to put these inserts in here. Because these inserts, they just have a different tone and a different feel to them versus the rest of the movie. They also are trying so hard to be cool that they're not cool. It's just one of those, and there's a lot of stuff that Sean Astin says in some of these inserts that's pointless. Like, he's just explaining obvious shit to the audience, which is annoying. So, yeah, this too cool for school narration, not a fan of it all. And that was added to the film. So I honestly am curious to see what the original version of the film is. And I will remain curious because I'll never be able to see it. That's on the cutting room floor. This movie doesn't even have a Blu-ray release. So I highly doubt that the original cut exists in any form that is available for anyone to watch. So it was given the name Whitewater Summer, and then it had the narration that was filmed and just shoehorned in there. The movie is also notable for having cinematography by John Alcott, who is a absolutely amazing cinematographer. He worked with Stanley Kubrick on a lot of his films. He did The Shining, and this is actually his last film. And you never would really think that in a million years that a cinematographer of his caliber, his last film, his last movie that he lent his lens to is Whitewater Summer. But I'm glad that he did the cinematography for this, because it's absolutely amazing for what it is. It really elevates this film, which is a smaller film, to a much higher level because of just how well it's shot. And the film was actually dedicated to him, and it's really a shame that it didn't get a wide theatrical release for that reason alone, because of the fact that this is John Alcott we're talking about. So I don't know why Columbia didn't give it a wider release just out of respect for John Alcott. I mean, it's honestly pretty lame on Columbia's part. He died soon after the film was, he died before the release of the movie. So I guess if they released it in 85, he would have still been alive, but I mean, if you're going to wait your time, if you're going to shelve something, you're going to spend all this extra money to shoot extra narration scenes, you would think that you would give it a wide release. I'm just saying. You're not going to, bow out after a short little theatrical release in the Pacific Northwest, which is kind of interesting that I live in the Pacific Northwest now, and I lived in the Pacific Northwest for most of my life. So it's kind of interesting to me that there's a movie that only had a release in the Pacific Northwest. It's like the first time I've ever heard of that. So the Pacific Northwest was some kind of exclusive location for any film in their release. Now, it's written by Ernest Kinoy, and the script, it's there. It's got some typical cliches in there, but I like the fact that the characters, especially the older boys in the group, they're not one note, that there's more to them, that they're not just a bunch of dicks or anything like that. I like that there's more to them than that. I think Sean Astin's character is fairly well written. Kevin Bacon's character is interesting, but I think the screenplay lets him down because it just paints him as a crazy guy, and I don't think that's their intention. So it just comes across as muddled, because I think what they're trying to do is trying to make it that he's not really crazy. He's just a guy who's really into things being a certain way, and he needs to find a way to let that go. He's insecure. I think that's what they're trying to do, but it doesn't come across that way. It just comes across like Kevin Bacon's character in this film is just Alan, not Alan. It's Vic. Vic is this total psycho, and it just doesn't work. It's one of those things about the film that doesn't really translate very well. I get what the screenwriter is trying to do, but it doesn't come across in the best way. And other than some script issues, I can't. The ending is abrupt, and it does not work. It just seems like this film was building up and building up to some kind of climax, and then all of a sudden a helicopter flies overhead, and Journey's song "Be Good to Yourself" plays in the background, and then you're like, okay. Then there's narration from Sean Astin, and I guess everyone's okay now. It's one of those things that, what is this? Was the film not even finished? Is that why it was shelved? Because in 1985 the film didn't actually get finished, or there was something that happened with the print. I really would like to know, because this ending, it sucks. It sucks the air out of the movie. It's not a terrible film by any means, and I wouldn't say that this is one of those endings like in Explorers that completely ruins the movie, but it does hurt the film. It does take it down quite a few pegs, because it's just so random, and it doesn't really match with the rest of the movie. The cast, I honestly think, is quite good for a film of this type. Um, for some reason, Wikipedia doesn't list everyone by their character name like they do for most films, but okay. So Kevin Bacon, he's in this as Vic. Sean Astin, he plays Alan, who's a lead. He's a nerdy kid. Honestly, I related a lot to Alan in this, because I've actually had moments in my life when I was a kid where I was afraid of going across a rope bridge. I was afraid of walking across a log over a rushing river. I could relate to those things. Like, I was deathly afraid of doing that when I was a kid. So I could really relate to Alan in this movie. Jonathan Ward, he plays Mitch. You have Casey Martel, who plays George. You have Matt Adler, who plays Chris. And those are the main characters. It's the kids. Casey Martel, he was in E.T. Jonathan Ward, you might recognize him from other films. He was in he was in the TV show Charles in Charge. He was also in Mac and Me. He was in a segment, The Shadow Man, from the 80s Twilight Zone. He also was the voice of Zack in Fern Gully, The Last Rainforest. Matt Adler, he was in Flight of the Navigator. I knew I recognized him. He was also in Dream a Little Dream. He was in Amazon Woman on the Moon. Yeah, he was in Flight of the Navigator. He was the older brother. Yeah, he was the older Jeff. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I remember. I knew I remember him from somewhere. He really plays a total different character compared to his character in Flight of the Navigator. So yeah, I thought all the kids, they did a really good job. Sean Astin, this is honestly one of his best acting roles. I would even say, in terms of, well, I wouldn't say it's better than The Goonies, because that's honestly, for his kid, for the roles that he played when he was a kid, that's the top. But this is a good second best. This is a overlooked performance by Sean Astin, and I can see why some people would say it is his best, because he's really taking on a pretty challenging role for a kid, let alone any actor. And he displays strength and integrity that is admirable, and it comes across as very genuine. It doesn't come across as forced. And that's something that I don't think films that try to do that and succeed at doing that get enough credit for, because that's not an easy thing to do. Now, when you talk about the film, you got to talk about the music, because the music is easily one of the highlights. I love the soundtrack. Not only do I like the song "Be Good to Yourself" by Journey, but I really like all the other songs that are in the film. "Wild Frontier" by Bruce Hornsby. You also have "On the Western Skyline" by Bruce Hornsby. "Life in a Dangerous Time" by the Cutting Crew. I really love that track. I had never heard this song before, but when the scene plays, when Alan's like, "I'm not gutting the fish," he's taking a stand, and he decides to spend the night on a little island with this song playing in the background. It's a really great scene. It's a prime example of how 80s films were so good and so efficient at taking songs and putting them to scenes that match the emotion perfectly. Uh, Life in a Dangerous Time fits the emotion that's supposed to be shown in the scene like a glove, and it's really one of the best scenes in the film. Definitely one of my favorite scenes, and it's a lot for a lot of people who like this film and are fond of this movie. It's one of their favorite scenes, and you can see why. It's a really great scene. Hot Shot's a fun song too, uh, as is Restless Heart. Hot Shot has never been officially released in its entirety, which is too bad because it's actually a pretty good, fun rock song. Streetwalker by Michael Boddicker is not too bad either. So yeah, the Cult also had a song of theirs, "Aphrodisiac Jacket" was in the film. Yeah, it's got a really good soundtrack. Never really got an official release, if I remember correctly. The score is also pretty good too. I definitely want to mention the score, because this score had its moments. I'm almost wondering what extra bits of the score were there, because the main theme was good. It was effective. It wasn't spectacular, but it was effective, and it was effective enough that I really was left wondering, like, what else did Michael Boddicker do? Because it seems like a lot of his music was cut from the film to put in the pop songs and to put in the rock songs. And I understand why they didn't make that choice, but I'm still curious to hear what kind of extra cues that Boddicker came up with for this movie. Now, it has a running time of about 90 minutes, and it goes by at a pretty good pace. It's not really a boring movie. It doesn't really lose your interest that much. It's not one of those films that feels like it's a bore or it's a snore or it's a slog to sit through. Goes by at a pretty quick pace. You got likable characters. Even Kevin Bacon at first seems like a likable character until he starts to show his true colors about how much of a really crazy guy he is when it comes to the rules and to his own way. And some of the kids were kind of annoying because they were just being douches, but the film knew when to draw the line with that, which I appreciate. And the whitewater scenes, they're really well shot. Those are quite exciting. The scene with the rope bridge I thought was really effective. It really made me sweat. As did the scenes where the kids were doing a free climb, and Vic left Alan hanging by a rope on the side of a cliff. That was pretty tense too. So I really did feel that a lot of those sequences were really well done. I'd say it's one of the best films I've seen that has dealt with kids in the wilderness with a realistic approach, because a lot of it didn't seem like it was that fantastical or that much of a fantasy. It was quite believable in its intensity and a lot of the moments in it. It's one of those things where it's also I feel the script is smarter than it might get credit for, despite its flaws, because of the fact that it shows these kids standing up to the adults. Like the whole film, they were following Vic's lead, and even at moments where they're like, "Wait a second, like he doesn't want to do it. What are you doing?" But eventually, the kids are like, "No, screw this. We're not gonna we're not gonna follow your lead anymore. You've lost it." And there's a lot of films like this where the kids will just keep following the lead because they're intimidated by the adult, and then it's only at the end of the movie when they're gonna show a backbone. And this is not one of those films. The kids show their backbone and are like, "No, fuck you, Vic. We're not doing this shit. We're going home." And that happens, I think, pretty like over an hour, or maybe even earlier than that into the film. So it's one of those things where there's a clear progression when it comes to the kids and to the characters in this film and how they evolve over the course of the movie. So I can see why people who enjoyed films like The Karate Kid and so on and so forth when they were young really had a good time with this, because it has some of the same sort of themes and goals and so on and so forth. It's not a competition, it's not a sports film, but it has some of the same stuff in it that really appealed to audiences back then who liked films like The Karate Kid. We have the underdog nerdy kid who rises above the odds and has some life lessons and shows his mettle. So, I really don't know what else to say about Whitewater Summer, except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars, I would give it 3.5 out of 5. I think it's a solid above average coming of age movie with a good cast. Mad direction, I think that's one of the things that lets it down. Alcott's cinematography is fantastic. It's every bit as indicative of his earlier really impressive work, but Jeff Bleckner is just not really a accomplished film director, and it shows. But there are other elements to it that still work. I mean, even though he's not really the best film director, he still does a decent job with the outdoor scenes and building tension when there needs to be tension. And if you're a fan of Kevin Bacon, this is definitely one of his earliest, most effective and efficient roles. I mean, despite the fact that the script's a little bit of a mess when it comes to his character, Bacon really brings it. And you can see why maybe Curtis Hanson and some of the people involved with The River Wild saw this movie and were like, we want Kevin Bacon to play Wade because we know he can play that role effectively in a film like this, because you can see a little bit of some beginnings of the Wade character in his character Vic in this movie. So, yeah, and definitely if you're a Sean Astin fan, if you're a fan of his work, you definitely have to see this. And I would be shocked if you haven't seen it already multiple times if you're a fan of Sean Astin. So, overall, I would say it's a little bit of a hidden gem. I don't think that it's a surefire classic. I don't think it's a great film, but for what it is, I had fun with it. Keep saying "but" over and over again. It's not really a film that should be the butt of anybody's joke, so to speak. It's not a film that is like the ass end of this type of genre. It's a solid above average coming of age movie that is not anything 100% original or unique, but it's got its thrills and it's got its moments of effective drama and storytelling, and that's kind of all it really needs, plus a really kick-ass soundtrack. So if it sounds interesting to you and you like these kinds of films from the 80s, I would definitely recommend you check it out. And Yeah, I don't know why this has fallen through the cracks that much, because it seems like it would have found a bigger foothold. Because you have Kevin Bacon and you have Sean Astin, the height of his popularity. So, yeah, I don't know. But it has gotten a little bit of a cult following, which is nice to see. So, anyway, thank you for watching my review of Whitewater Summer. And as always, I will see you later. See ya.